Hello. Welcome along to episode 173 of Adventures in Pop. My name's Simon Jacobs, and today I would like to just talk to you about one subject, but it's with various different strands of it, but that is how to put together a kind of the organization for putting out some new tracks from a new album. This is the kind of pre-release period, and I just want to talk through all of the kind of things that I've had to think about that might be useful for you if you're doing the same thing. What are those little issues that you have to get your head around in order to have a kind of smooth and successful rollout of a whole bunch of singles leading up to an album? Because that is the situation I'm now in, and I want to take you through it. So, I think on YouTube you'll probably find a lot of people offering lots of advice about the whole pre-release thing. And sometimes it's made out to sound like, you're about to go into a major theatre of war. It's like you've got to be ready months and months in advance. You've got to have the right uniform, and it all sounds very serious indeed. I think it is quite a serious thing. I think you can really enhance how successful your music is by thinking of all these things beforehand, because there are a lot of little details that I think, unless you're kind of aware of it, maybe until you've done it once or twice, actually gone through the process of releasing a whole bunch of singles in an album, some of it is not obvious. So what am I talking about? Okay. A few weeks ago, at the end of May, so almost a couple of months ago, I released Strange Alien, which is my sixth album, and that had been a kind of a whole year of releasing singles and eventually culminating in the release of the album, as I say, 31st of May. Quite important then to give it some time to get out there, to promote all of the tracks, to make sure all the videos have gone out. I did a video of the whole album, all joined together. So you've got all the videos in a row, etc. So you don't want to start releasing your new material right on the back of that album release, because it's like you won't have given it time to percolate, to get known by anybody or to be out there. You want to be still concentrating your promotion efforts on that album for a couple of months. But at the same time, you don't want to leave the gap in between that album and the start of new releases too wide, because the Spotify algorithm would be in danger of forgetting all about you. In other words, it is a monster that needs feeding. And yes, it's completely right to give it a couple of months off, maybe 3 months. But beyond that, I think you're in danger then of Spotify starting to think that, you're not going to be releasing for some time, or that you're now less serious than you were before. And as I say, the algorithm might, which has spent time getting to know who is interested in your music and what type of people and where they are and all that kind of thing, it's going to feel like it's got to start all over again. So you don't want that. So there is a kind of an optimum time, and I'm hoping that by releasing my first track in the middle of August, I'm kind of, inside that 3-month window. I think probably the 3-month window is genuinely is a 4-month window, but I'm not wanting to leave anything to chance. So where I'm at is that on the 9th of August, very exciting, it's about 3 weeks away, I'm going to be releasing the first track of a whole new album. I've already got the title of the album, I've got the kind of the cover art ready, and I will take you through that as we kind of step through these things you need to remember as part of the pre-release organisation and planning that should go into this kind of work. Okay, so specifically, what am I talking about? Okay, I've got a little list here, and I want to take you through it. Buckle up. And it starts with some really obvious things, but this is kind of important. If you're going to release an album, and in my case, I always imagine an album to be 12 tracks. Why 12 tracks? Because partly because that feels about right, but also because 12 tracks is likely to come to about 50 minutes. And I think that seems to be an amount of time where you can, you can grab somebody's attention. I think beyond that, it's quite difficult. And if it's too much shorter than that, people are going to feel a bit shortchanged. So I kind of feel like 50 minutes is best. It doesn't have to be exact, obviously. And 12 tracks tends to be about right. It might be a couple of minutes short of 50, but that's fine. So first thing is on my list is you're going to release an album. You've got basically roughly 12 tracks. Say my first point is that you need to know what those 12 tracks are. You need to, by the time you're releasing the beginning of that album. Yes, of course you're going to carry on writing stuff while that period of time of releasing is continuing, because that's what you do. But you still, I think, have to have your 12 tracks ready to go. You need to know what they are, and have them in a good enough state that at least you are confident that they are the right tracks to go on this album. Now, for me, my next album is going to be an album that is going to be much more dancey, so it's going to have a very different feel. And so I've been making sure that the tracks that are going on it have got the requisite amount of dance in them. Okay, so that's still a very broad remit, but that's what I want this album to kind of feel like. So it's going to be a little bit of a departure. It's going to be a more dancey kind of record. And so in identifying those tracks, I've got to make sure that they kind of, fit the bill. And it's a very loose concept, but they've got to fit that bill. So once you've got your 12 tracks, then obviously you need to make sure that as you're releasing them, you are getting them up to the right standard. So that involves making sure they're as well mixed as you possibly could get them, and then mastering. Now, you might have done this way in advance. You might have them all sitting in a file, all mixed and mastered. I tend not to, because I quite like the opportunity to fiddle a little bit in the final week before I send it off to my distribution company to get onto Spotify. I quite like. I've got them all there. I know that they're all at the right kind of standards. I'm happy with all the songs, but some of them are more absolutely finished than others, and that's okay. So I'm not panicking about that, but I just have to make sure that I kind of build into whatever my planning is, that they will all need a bit of final mixing and some mastering, and that does take some time, and it varies depending on the track. So that's I've already sent. I know that obviously I'm releasing one on the 9th of August, so that is already out there distributed. The mixing and the mastering's all done. It's got its cover art, etc. And obviously, as soon as I'm talking about cover art for one, I need to be thinking about the whole lot, because there needs to be something, I believe, that binds this group of tracks together visually as well as sonically, so that people kind of know that they're off this album. They're going to be part of this family. But before we get into that, just one other thing is you just need to make sure that if you're going to be releasing a track every month, say, and I think we've talked about that before. Also, another thing where, there's no right and wrong, but it probably is an optimum. It's about once a month. Then you need to know that, obviously, now look, I'm with DistroKid. They ask for 4 weeks in advance. So, I just have to make sure, again, in terms of having a schedule, and by the way, I really do think it's a good idea to have a written schedule. You want to put in what you hope the release date will be, work back from that to think about, when you're going to need to send it to your distributor. Okay? So do have a schedule. Okay, and then let's talk a little bit about this business about the artwork. It's quite important. It's one of those things that I think, people can leave it to one side, and then it's got the capacity to really trip you up or just delay you because everything's ready, but you just hadn't thought about the art. And for me, it's quite important at the beginning when I'm at this stage and just about to release, the first track off a whole new batch of songs that are going to be on a different album. It's quite important for me that I've thought about the artwork and that there's a kind of, as I say, a brand, a familiar theme that's going to go through all of these tracks. And it's going to bind them all together. And I think you can have some fun with this. Now, I've just said to you before, this is going to be a dancey kind of album. I was going to say record. Record is a bit old-fashioned, isn't it? So yeah, it's going to be a dancey kind of album. So I was thinking, what kind of cover art is going to signify that? I have put together a series of covers because I basically try to work out all of the covers for all of the singles in advance, make sure they're ready, and think about then what the album's going to look like as well, which can be slightly different but needs to be part of the same family. Okay, and I think, look, that is just a sensible idea. I'm sure people will have different ways of doing their branding, but I think it's certainly important to do the pre-planning. So here is the cover of my first single that's going to be on this next album. So the single is called You Do You, and as you can see, we've got a glitter ball that's kind of on the floor. I just quite like this, and I'm going to use that central theme as the basis for all the cover art for the songs on this album. And the album at this stage is going to be called You Might As Well Dance. I quite like the might as well dance kind of notion of if you're feeling a bit blah, or if you're a bit bored, then you might as well dance. So that is the name of the album. I've told you everything now, haven't I? And we're going to see quite a lot of that glitter ball in various forms over the next year. Forgive me. So I hope that's going to be okay with you. All right, what's the next thing? We've talked about the artwork. We talked about make sure you've already thought about the name of the album. Well, one of the next things is once you've sent it off to your distributor and it's now appearing as a pre-release on Spotify, you might have the opportunity to take up Spotify's offer of getting a marquee promotion set up or a showcase promotion. Now, both of those require you to have a certain number of regular listeners, monthly listeners, and a certain number of monthly listeners in one territory. So it can be a bit complicated. Not all parts of the world are yet included, which I think is a real shame, and I hope Spotify will hurry up because it should be a kind of a level playing field for everybody. But if you've got the opportunity to go with Marquee and Spotify, then your decision is really about to what extent do you go with, what is your budget, and how can you use these to the best way possible. Now, look, Marquee is about new releases. Showcase is about anything you want to highlight. And the other thing you're allowed to do for any release, irrespective of whether you're new or old to this, is once you've got a release out there, you can pitch it to the Spotify editorial team, and you always should. And the rule there is you can't pitch more than one song at a time. So when it's released, then you can pitch the next one, which is one of the reasons why, you need to give a bit of time in between each one. I know that's the tail wagging the dog to some extent, but it's quite an important tale. So pitch to Spotify, and that involves talking a little bit about the track, where it came from, and talking about how you're going to be promoting it. And it's important to be succinct, but to get that right and not to miss the opportunity of doing it in the first place. Okay, so we're doing okay now. Okay, well, other decisions you do need to bear in mind, yes, the frequency of releases. So are you going for once every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 months? What's it going to be? I advise about a month, but you don't have to be, hidebound by that. Are you going to release the tracks, if you've got them already, are you going to release them in the order that you think the album is going to be? So in other words, are you releasing literally track 1, then track 2, track 3? Because I've decided on this occasion, I might mess around with that a bit and just put them out as and when in a way that just sort of feels nice. And then I might rejiggle them for the album. Now, look, I know that sounds a bit like who gives a... but I kind of do care what order they're in. For some reason, it's important to me. But And then the question is, well, why don't you just release them in that order? And I don't really know. I'm just trying something a little bit different. And part of it was about which track I felt was readiest to go and I wanted to get started. So I've been a bit pragmatic about it, but it doesn't really matter. But at least think about it. The other question in the same vein is, how many singles do you release before you put the album out? And I'm thinking roughly 10 singles, then a couple that come with the album. Doesn't have to be. You can play around with that as well. And then, you do need to think, what is your promotion plan? I've talked about marquee and showcase, part of the Spotify kind of, stable of promotions, but you might have a different way of doing it. You want to obviously utilize your social media, all the kind of connections you've got, any of the relationships you've built up, be sending things to people. Are you trying to get things on the radio? Are you trying to get things in the papers? What's your plan? Is it just social media? Is it social media plus? What's your budget? And obviously, I probably need to say, beware of all those promotion services online that promise you the earth and are very likely to get you into trouble. Spotify are still coming down quite hard on promotion that they believe is heavily botted. So keep it authentic, keep it organic, keep it genuine, and try not to get into trouble with those promotion services. And I speak as somebody who has got into trouble a couple of times, so I'm not being judgmental of anyone else. So look, that's those are the steps that you need to go through. Oh, and there's one other thing, actually, I shouldn't forget this. Although I think there are some question marks about how valuable it is in reality these days, and maybe it's becoming less valuable, maybe it won't be necessary at some point, I'm still making a video for every single that gets released, and that also needs to be built into your schedule. You need to make sure you've thought about how much time is that going to take, when do you do it in relation to each release, because you've now got 12 videos to make. So, good luck with that. So there's quite a lot of work involved, and that's why I would say, for goodness sake, write it down, plan it carefully, and good luck with that. Thank you. We'll talk again soon. I'll come back with some brand new music and obviously the countdown as we get to August the 9th and my first single from the next album, which is going to be called You Might As Well Dance, and the single is You Do You, out on August the 9th. With that excitement, I will see you next time. Bye.